views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to today's verdict, the live and interactive show where we take your questions and bring on guests. Well, today we have three important topics. The first one is absentee ballots. Hopefully we will not have a repeat of what happened during the last past election. We're going to discuss with the state senator what is going on in Albany to reform the law. Next up, we'll be discussing tort reform during COVID-19 and how that is going to be impacting our court system. And finally, the important act, Protect Our Courts, which has to do with the immigration policies and whether or not people can go to the courthouse and still feel protected. So as you can see, we have much to get to. Stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. Our first guest is Yesenia Mata, the executive director at La Colmena. I hope I'm saying that properly. Yesenia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about something that the viewers are very concerned with, and that is the lurking around the courthouses of law enforcement, many times trying to pick up their relatives and ultimately have them sent back to their host countries. Could you give the viewers a little bit of a background as to what has been going on with law enforcement? And I'm talking maybe pre-COVID.
Absolutely. So before this pre-COVID, many instances, La Colmena would go with one of our members to court, whether it was because they had to go to civil court, whether it was a DUI, whether it was because they were driving without a license, very minor things. So the reason why we started going to court with some of our members and people that would just come to La Colmena was because we started hearing how when certain individuals would just go to civil court, again, for minor things, as soon as they were walking out of the courtroom, they were being detained by ICE. And a lot of the times when they were asking for a judicial warrant or they were just asking for a way to identify themselves, they wouldn't even provide them with that. So we started hearing this. And because of that, that's when we initiated the ICE Watch. The ICE Watch is a group of individuals, U.S. citizens, attorneys that get together every morning to patrol the courtrooms. To make sure that ICE is not there, to make sure that people that do go to court, as well as Colmena members, know that they are there in case ICE does appear. So it came to the point where we needed to be patrolling the courtroom. The community needed to start patrolling the courtroom because ICE was just appearing when people were just going to court for civil claims, minor claims, and they were being detained as soon as they were walking out, and they never received any sort of identification from ICE.
And I assume they're plainclothes, so it's not as if you would know who they were sitting in the back, or it's not like they're wearing any type of uniforms that say ICE on them. So how would you even know, who's there and who's not? How did you even figure that out?
Yes, and there were times that many at times would identify as police officers. And this would really scare the individuals that were just walking out of courtroom, and then we were finding out that they were identifying themselves as police officers, and they said that they would have every right. But that's why we started doing the ICE Watch, because we wanted to make sure that people were protected. But because of that as well, when we were putting that announcement, we were standing outside the courtroom, letting in the courtroom itself and the individuals and the police officers know that we are there and we will make sure that our community is protected. Sure. When we started doing that, it was very interesting to see that we didn't see a lot of ICE action during that time when we were there in front of the courtrooms.
I know there were some judicial personnel who tried to protect those who were possibly going to be deported if they were picked up by letting them out the side doors or different things. One judge actually got into a little trouble for that. I think you remember what I'm talking about. But I think many people do agree that courts should be a safe haven. Certainly, you know, if we're asking them to come, whether we subpoena them or whatever it is. Let's talk a little bit about the Protect Our Courts Act and how that came about, and you know, just why it's so important.
Well, this is very interesting, right? Because this started being a movement by a community, because that's what we started seeing, that people were afraid to go to court. You see, at times many were sent to court because they needed they didn't have a driver's license, but because they were afraid even to go to court, because they started hearing these stories that ICE might be there. What started happening was that they would just not appear at court, and then it would just keep increasing and increasing, and then it would just be they would just end up having a case against them, right? So one of the things, like, we as activists started saying, what can we do? And with this particular law that came into place, right, Protect Our Courts Act, this specific law prohibits ICE from making any civil arrest of people attending New York State courthouses without a judicial warrant. And this particular law protects people not just in the courthouse, but also traveling to and from court. And
really, so you mean if you're even like a block or 2 blocks away, they can't follow you or tail you, I guess, if you stopped at a traffic light 3 or 4 blocks away? That the act protects you for that too?
Yeah, so it provides a clear protocol, right, for court staff managing the ICE policing at the courthouses to know that they cannot follow them to and from the courthouse. So this in itself, right, it's a huge win for the community, because now from us at La Colmena, many people, when they go to court, when they have a court date, they come to La Colmena and tell us, can you come to court with us? Or will the ICE watch the ICE watch group will be there? You see, it's like these little things that now we could tell the community that now this new law came into place with which is called Protect Our Courts. And we have been having webinars providing this information to our community, even through our food distribution that we had today. We're providing
tell the viewers about that, because I think that's a wonderful thing you guys just did.
Yeah, so today we had our food distribution. We have it every Wednesday. When the pandemic hit, our doors still remained open, and they're still open. So because we decided to, every food distribution, we take the opportunity to educate the community. And today, as a matter of fact, we were talking about Protect Our Courts, and many of them were very excited to hear this, and they wanted to learn more. But you could just see in their face, like, the relief. You
know, there's enough to worry about with COVID, to think about that somebody's going to, you know, grab your father or your sister or somebody in a courthouse, or even on the way to a courthouse. You know, at this point, we have a new administration coming in. It's President Biden. It's really on the federal level at this point. Do you think it's going to trickle down in terms of relief to those in New York, in terms of even more stringent policies that may end up coming down with respect to immigration? What are your thoughts for the next 4 years?
Well, for us right now, right, we know that this particular law offers vital protection to our immigrant community here in the courthouses, right? But when we do talk about this new administration coming in, there is still various hesitation from various activists, from various organizations, because we have seen how during the Obama administration, that's where there was a huge number of deportations. And with this particular administration, right, Trump in itself, we don't want to say that it started with Trump, but it intensified even with Trump. It intensified even more. So we hope that this administration does learn from its mistakes, because that is something that Biden has even indicated, that they realize that they made a huge mistake when it comes to immigration. So we hope that they learn from their past mistakes. But one thing's for sure, that organization and activists, we're going to make sure that we keep an eye on this administration, that they do follow through with all the promises they made during their campaign, or else they're just going to be also a one-term president.
And you said, finally, we were talking a little bit before you came on, a little bit about the economic relief that you're trying to help with some of the members of your community. Tell us what else you're doing to help them.
Well, throughout this entire pandemic, La Colmena has distributed about $1.5 million to the immigrant community here on Staten Island. We also have provided more than 7,000 meals to the community, and that in itself has been very difficult, right? We're a very small organization, and we could only wonder what's going to happen to the immigrant community with the second wave. We do hope that when this, as this COVID vaccine is coming out now, that is being distributed to the most vulnerable communities, is being distributed to the Latino, to the Black community, to the immigrant community that have been affected the most and have died at a higher rate. So one of the things is that we do hope that this COVID vaccine is distributed effectively. And as well, we want to know what's going to happen, especially to those that were in detention center and then were released due to COVID. We do have many of our clients who were released from detention center because the COVID virus was spreading. But we are now keeping an eye to see what's going to happen with them. And we're just making sure that we are very well organized to make sure that we fight in court for them.
Well, you're fighting the good fight, and we appreciate it. Hopefully you'll come back in the next couple of months and give us an update. Okay, Yesenia?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the great work you all are doing.
It's a pleasure. All right. Stay with us. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this. All right, well, a couple of weeks ago, we sat down with State Senator David Carlucci to discuss absentee ballot legislation. Let's take a look. All right, we are so happy to have back with us. Of course, we're virtual. Last time we had him, it was I think it was actually in the studio. State Senator David Carlucci. Senator, thanks for being back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to join you virtually.
All right. Well, so much has been going on, and the most important thing that has really been knocking around the state Senate has been these absentee ballots. It's been all over the news. It's even been national absentee ballots. Tell us what's been going on with respect to Albany and the absentee ballot issue.
Yeah, normally you would see a situation where 3% on average of the overall vote was absentee. Now, because of COVID, because of the changes we've made to the absentee laws in New York State, we've had a huge increase in the percentage of people that vote absentee. So you're looking at 25, 30% of the overall vote might have been absentee. The problem is that come election night, those ballots aren't counted. So they have to wait a full week before the absentee ballots are opened up and started to be counted. So the problem is other states have stepped into the future, have met this issue. New York has lagged far behind. So if we were a battleground state for the presidency, we would be the ridicule of the nation. So we've adopted new changes. We've made it easier for people to vote. Now we need to step into the 21st century, and the legislation that we've proposed would allow the Board of Elections to count those absentee ballots on election day and then post the results after the polls have closed. Just the same way we do with early voting, the same way we do when people go and vote in person and on election day, and we need to do the same for absentee ballots.
Well, look, logistically, how do you do that? How do you get everybody on the same page? It's all coordinated. New York's a big state. You're right. If we were a battleground state, there'd be a lot more news about it.
Yeah.
But logistically, how do you even get everybody on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that other states have been doing for a long time. We have had a process in place, and many of our election laws date back many years. And we've tried to tweak that. And now with the ramifications of COVID-19, with the ramifications of making it easier to vote absentee, which I think is a good thing, we have not kept up on the tabulating process. So we have these old rules that say, okay, to make sure that we allow people their vote to come in, because you can post date it on election day. That means it doesn't get to the Board of Elections till later. So all we're saying in our legislation is count the ballots you already have.
Gotcha.
So some ballots could still arrive. This wouldn't certify the elections earlier, but it would give us a better indication, because now you really need, on election night and the days following, you need a political interpreter to tell you what's happened. And there's a lot of confusion in that. And I think that is not healthy for our democracy.
Was there any pushback? I mean,
well, the Board of Elections,
I can't imagine how there would be. You'd say, but was there any pushback?
The only
on this?
pushback is, we have our Board of Elections that is used to doing things the way they do things. And that's a consistent theme when you see in government that many times there's just pushback because that's the way it's been done. And it's hard to see a new way forward. The great thing about this country is we have 50 states and we have models of them doing it right and models of them doing it wrong. And we need to pay close attention to what's happening and what's working and what's not.
Let's talk property tax exemptions. It's been in the news. You've been in the news. Tell the viewers a little bit about it, if you could.
Yeah, so right now, particularly in the Hudson Valley, but throughout New York State, we have a situation where we pay some of the highest property taxes in the nation. Our seniors are eligible for some property tax exemptions. For example, we have the low income senior property tax exemption. And if a senior over the age of 65 is making under approximately $37,000 a year, they qualify for an enhanced exemption on top of the star and enhanced star exemption. The problem is that we have tens of thousands of seniors just in the Hudson Valley that qualify for this property tax assessment deduction. And they have to go to the town hall and meet with the assessor and reapply. So over the next few months, you'll have thousands of seniors going to the town hall and taking these unnecessary trips. So working with the town assessors, we are pushing the governor to do an executive order. I've also put in legislation to allow for these exemptions to continue for 1 year without having to reapply. We have the Department of Taxation and Finance. It keeps solid records on everyone's income. If there's a problem, they can rectify it. But this is something where we don't need to do this bureaucratic work. We don't need to do this paperwork. Let's keep our town halls as minimally visited as possible, and let's keep our seniors safe. But many will be forced to take that trip because they're fearful that they could lose this tax exemption.
You know what? I can't see anything more important right now than to protecting the senior citizens during the coronavirus and forcing them, or if they feel forced, to go outside into an indoor space where, you know, they're mingling with anybody else. It's just not a good idea.
You're exactly right. And the fear is that you have many people, and this is a vulnerable population for COVID, that they're going to be very confused because over the next few weeks, assessors will be sending out notifications about the reapplication process. So it's a waste of money from the town having to send that notification out. And then it's a lot of anxiety and confusion that will be caused, and there'll be unnecessary trips going to the town hall from exactly the population that we want to keep safe.
Let me just ask you generally, your constituents, how are they faring with the coronavirus issue? I know there's a second surge, first surge, whatever you want to say. With boots on the ground, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that we have done remarkably well. It's been a huge hardship for everyone. There's no question about it. We've transformed the way we conduct our lives. There's no doubt about that. However, in the Hudson Valley particularly, we were the heart of where there was a real problem early in March and April. Then now we are much lower compared to the other parts of the country. But so it hit us first. Now we can learn from what worked, what didn't work. The governor is calling on the hospitals to do the surge capacity right now, to plan. And I think people are being responsible and doing the right thing as best as we can.
Well, we want to thank you again for returning and giving us an update, and always the best with whatever it is you're doing or intend to do. You're a friend of the show, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, look forward to joining you again soon.
All right. State Senator David Carlucci. All right, stay with us. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this. We are back with a friend and a guest of the show, Tom Stebbins, the Executive Director at Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, David. Stuck at home, just like everybody else, but doing the best I can.
Yeah, these are troubling times, especially for the court system. Let's get right into it. We know you've been on before. We know your position about lawsuits. Too many, too much money. I would think, though, during this time, there's been a little bit of a screeching halt. What are your thoughts in terms of COVID and the court system as we begin our discussion?
Well, the court system has certainly slowed down, and the courts have really try to react to what they need to do to still have jury trials, to still make sure that all this is happening. And for a lot of our members, you know, some of them are concerned that they still have to, they can't resolve these cases. For a lot of small businesses, the case is on their mind and they'd like to get it done with. And for a lot of them too, they're still paying for it. They have to pay their defense lawyer.
What type of cases do you see that are still moving along enough that there's unfortunately billable hours and different types of monies that are coming out of the insurance adjusters' pockets?
Sure. Well, a lot of these are just personal injury cases, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
whether they're slip and falls or 240 cases, those kinds of cases. And then there's also, you know, well, as you may have heard and you may have covered on your show, is that a lot of the small businesses are trying to go to their insurers and say, hey, we need some business interruption insurance. We need some coverage here because we don't, you know, we haven't been getting paid. And unfortunately, the insurers, they say, well, you should have bought pandemic insurance, which apparently Wimbledon did. I don't know if you heard that. Wimbledon, the tennis, and I know you're a tennis guy.
I am.
Wimbledon, the tennis tournament, they bought pandemic insurance, which paid out $120 million. But most small businesses did not buy pandemic insurance. And most small businesses have tried to go after their insurers for that money and have been unable to recover because they didn't buy the pandemic insurance. And the courts have really sided with the insurers in those cases.
Well, some of the, you know, I know the business interruption lawsuits, they are like kicking their way through the court system. They're not completely done, I think, with discovery. It could, you know, that's the type of thing that it may actually be years till you figure out the fine print and whether you're covered or not. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the initial rulings have been that the insurers do not have to cover. I mean, there's been, you know, the majority of the cases that have come out, and those have been in other states, but the majority of the cases have sided with the insurers and said, you do have pandemic insurance as a product. And so if you wanted to buy pandemic insurance, you should have. It reminds me a lot of floods, actually. Folks know that flood insurance or their homeowner's insurance, it doesn't cover floods. And similarly, your regular insurance, it doesn't apparently cover pandemics.
Now, I'm sure you've heard, there's been a reduction of staff, or soon to be in the court system, per the directions of the Office of Court Administration.
Right.
Not many judges now are not being recertified.
Forced into retirement.
That's right. Clerks, well, clerks will still be there, but there's a hiring freeze, and any staff that is attached to those judges will not be able to come back. I'm sure the court system will be affected. Your thoughts on that with respect to the slowdown in terms of cases moving through?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in Albany and everything is getting cut, right? This is really a preemptive strike by the Office of Court Administration to show that they are trying to reduce costs. But we are facing in this state a $20 billion deficit, and there's going to be cuts everywhere. And so, you know, certainly we're disappointed to see any cuts to the judicial system, but there are going to be cuts everywhere. They're going to be hard. They're going to be draconian. And I applaud the court system for really trying to get ahead of it and showing the state that they're doing the best that they can to reduce costs.
You know, you do have the lawsuit that's out there with respect to the judges now who are bringing the lawsuit against OCA for ageism, you know. Right. In some respects, they do have a point. I don't think, you know, 70 years necessarily makes you unable to perform your functions as a justice, but that's the statute. I mean, I guess you'd have to overturn the statute. What do you think about the lawsuit? Do you think they'll be successful there?
You know, I haven't really seen much on that lawsuit. I haven't read it, so I don't know much about it. But, you know, it seems to me that the court administration, like I said, is just trying to get ahead of these cuts. They're coming, and yeah. The state will do whatever it needs to do to not have to pay out whomever they have to pay out. And they have to. They have $20 billion deficit. There's no money there. They're going to have to find it somewhere. They're going to have to make those cuts somewhere. And, you know, the court administration is doing their best to get ahead of it.
Let's talk jury trials.
Yeah.
Where do you think we're heading here? There haven't really been any significant trials. You know, we had a couple of them in Bronx County. Dan Cassidy, he's a friend of mine. He was the first one to try a plaintiff personal injury case in Bronx County. And the case ended up, I think, basically either settling or towards the end, it was a high-low, it went away. But then they cut the jury trials again. that cut costs for everybody, but at the same time, again, your members are kicking around with these cases that are still around. It's like it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. What do you think?
I mean, I think the whole jury system is going to change. I think that we are similar to what we're doing right now. It's going to be more virtual. It's going to be more remote. It's going to, my kids are getting laptops from the school. I don't see why the court administration doesn't start sending laptops to juries as those processes start to happen. Do you need to see somebody face to face to have a jury selection? Or could you just get a certain relevant set of stats, and then if you need to go back to someone and ask questions, maybe you can do that. But there's no reason. I mean, if anybody served on a jury, they know, or just been called for jury duty, it's a pain in the neck. You gotta go to the court, and I know that's easy for you, David. You're there all the time, but for the rest of us, you gotta go to court, you gotta check in, you gotta answer all these questions. Do I need to do this in person? Do we need to do this at 50 people all at once? We don't.
Yeah, I just don't know how you're gonna prevent the jurors from either being distracted at home or talk about it with their spouses in the middle of it, or leave to go to the bath. There's a lot of nuances to it, but I guess you're right.
Tell my kids that they're in school right now, and I hope that they're not distracted. But guess what? They're gonna be. I mean, that's just the reality, and it's the nature of the thing. And it might be, as we talked about before, a way to reduce costs, right? Getting all those people in, having the cattle call, all of that is expensive, and we may be able to reduce costs and reduce the impact of jury duty, right? Everybody's always trying to get out of jury duty, but maybe if it's a little more remote, it's a little easier to handle. We can get people in juries.
Getting back to the budget up with Governor Cuomo, a lot of pressure on him, cuts everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you think we're going to feel it the most? Infrastructure, transportation. Just curious, because you're there.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm in Albany right now, and it's going to be across the board cut. I mean, first and foremost, there's just going to be 10% off the top of everything, I think. So whether it's, parks or aging or libraries or whatever, it's all going to get cut. I think also the state is going to cut local services because that's not their budget and it is not their problem. So a lot of the support that they give to local budgets, that's all going to trickle down. So all of these cities like New York City, like Albany, like Far Rockaway, wherever it may be, those places are all going to start feeling the pinch. And right now, I think they're deluding themselves by thinking that those cuts aren't coming, but they certainly are.
Listen, I spent 4 years up in Schenectady. It was good to see it come back strong. Yep. And, we want these towns and these cities to stay that way. Hopefully it bounces back. Any final tips, any final thoughts about where we're going, where we're heading?
Well, we can only hope that we're all going to survive this together. I wish everybody a happy holidays, and I hope you're having a wonderful time. I hope you're staying safe, and I hope you're staying sane out there. And we appreciate you watching the show.
You're the best. Love to have you. Listen.
Love to see you, David. Take care.
All right. Well, that's all we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have a question or an issue you'd like to see on a future show, just feel free to email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. Until we see you again, remember, know the issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.